Good morning, friends. It's hankmcgurk, your pajama scholar, here today with what I call Operation Tossaway. We'll be exploring a little bit of the esoteric today, as we explored a bit of the esoteric yesterday. When it comes to freeing the mind, and let me begin with a preface. And that is to say that even on YouTube, where the illusion of choice is maintained, there are only a certain amount of selections that you can make. Just like cable television, you could have 100 channels of all the same thing. Or used to be 6, 8, and 12, or 3 channels for the analog television, where you just crank the dial and that's all you got. And this was a way that agents of the past and agents of today control the minds of many. And it's done by shaping a singular narrative. So everyone is thinking all of the same things, they're discussing all of the same things. So you even have the illusion of choice, believing that, well, it's your choice that you chose to look at whatever Julian Assange video was out there, of which there are many. You get to choose who you watched pontificate on the subject. You got to choose maybe Q, or maybe you got to choose a progressive sort of political, and you're pursuing that, or maybe you're pursuing this road that is the one giant Zionist world conspiracy, or maybe you're chasing civil war. But these narratives are pretty close, and none of them really free the mind. Now, the other day when I was live streaming, I was actually looking for a note about Julian, the Julian Assange thing, which I did find, and I can pull that up right now. And I actually, strangely enough, I put it in ham sandwich, and that is a kind of a veiled reference to, I believe, what John Podesta's password was, or the DNC server that was unlocked by, well, supposedly Seth Rich, probably. Well, Seth Rich, I mean, Cartel did murder him after all for being a patriot and moving that stuff on to WikiLeaks. That's really kind of the truth of the matter. But what really is WikiLeaks, or what became of WikiLeaks later? Now, this is not where I intend to go today. This is a esoteric discussion, but I wanted to address this point before we really begin in earnest, so I could clarify what I missed yesterday. And I just wanted to point out that you need to, if you want to look truly at the Julian Assange piece, just take a look at everybody who's involved with it. And let's just name a few. Chris Hedges, who is, in my opinion, I don't personally know the man, but what I've seen of him, he's kind of a, well, I would describe him sort of as a gleeful psychopath. It's some of those little things that just slip through him. That's the, where he says, oh, well, I go to the prisons and I see all these problems of the common man, just almost gleeful in his station. and then to go and encourage violent revolution instead of a revolution of truth, a revolution of spirit, a revolution of mind. And he is an oligarch, or part of the oligarchical complex, pretending so often to be what he is not. I mean, he went to school with the people that he says that he hates, and I'm sure he does. And in that respect, I appreciate and like him, and that's probably part of the reason why he actually has an earnest distrust and dislike of the system. But he himself is trying to save it, and as am I. Fascism doesn't suit, but the Republic, that most certainly does. What the United States is, and what our forefathers wrote about, and their opinions, which are explicit and clear about how our government is supposed to function. Surely there are some adaptations that don't need to be put into law when we're talking about subsurface structures such as the national security state. But the Republic, or the Western idea, the meritocracy, that's what it's about, and constitutional principles, where God-given and inalienable rights, which really shouldn't have to be codified, are codified because people respect law. And so our forefathers had the foresight to codify these things. Our forefathers originally didn't even think it was necessary to have a Bill of Rights because, well, they considered if somebody was to push too hard, then, well, the people would revolt. And we see that in France with the Yellow Jackets. Or Gilets jaunes. Vive la France. And I had said a while back, and I meant this just in jest, and I had done a video a while back about Macron or Le Pen. Macron beating Le Pen. I forget what I named the video. I knew that was going to have significant cultural impact in France. I digress. But who else is tied to the Julian Assange thing? Well, I thought I had seen a security cam picture of him being loaded into the back of a black sedan. And for a long time, researchers were trying to read what was written on a typed document held in the hands of whoever was in that mercenary team that had potentially collected Julian Assange. When I look at the person that they drug out of the embassy, it looks like somebody else. It looks like they picked up a bum off the street and they put a beard on him, so you couldn't recognize the major differences in the chin. But that's speculation on my part. Who else is connected to the Julian Assange piece? Well, you've got guys like Jimmy Dore. You've got guys like Ray McGovern. Now, who was Ray McGovern? Ex-CIA. Guys like Bill Binney, ex-NSA. Daniel Ellsberg. You've got, Curacao, all tied up in it. They're all spooks. Jimmy Dore, I think he's he is what he says he is, some jack-off nightclub comedian. But he has found a niche where he's able to basically reinforce a narrative that MSNBC didn't want to pick up or could not get the viewers for. I mean, it's all one giant continuous psyop, one operation from the next to keep people caged in one frame of mind, as if they can take your freedom of speech away. You know, the heart, like Rousseau says, freedom is in the heart of the free man. He carries it with him everywhere. It's in the Constitution as rule number 1, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. so we don't have government coming along and abusing people or denying them access to be able to publish as they choose, which has been done. It's been done for over control over media, because if we were living in a capitalist society as our forefathers intended and envisioned, businesses that did not get viewers would go out of business and they would fail. So, is there any question that we're not living in a capitalist society when you see business after business soaking up and doing terrible, abusive things to their subscribers and patrons and participants and viewers, to the point that they don't even want to consume the narrative anymore because it consists of lies or things that are not compatible with their natural social framework, their culture. So in a capitalist society, those businesses would have already failed. So even though we haven't begun the esoteric discussion, this is always one piece that I must continually reinforce and reiterate, because I truly believe that the answers are in the past, and our beloved republic had been subverted since before I had been born and before most of my generation had been born. And the elders may have forgotten the way because of the fight against communism and the brainwashing I talked about earlier. But know that any control over this entire narrative, of course, they're going to fire you up early with Venezuela, or fire you up early with another possible war with Iran, or fire you up because a war with Russia, or fire you up with a trade war with China. Well, why do they choose these exotic locales? Because you don't speak their language. Well, it didn't used to be that we could speak their languages quite so easily and have access to the people that are there and what they believe and see them as human. It's very difficult to dehumanize an enemy when you know them, or to make an enemy out of the people that you know and you see them as human, and that the cultures that they have are old and vibrant and important, and that we have things to trade and to share. So the old school scare the shit out of everyone, divide and conquer game is getting a little old, well, very, very long in the tooth. And incompetence of leadership can only be covered up by such mind control tactics. If you have good leadership, or what Sun Tzu would call the mandate of heaven, you don't need force, you don't need lies, because you're just qualified to lead. And that is why we have a republic, a meritocratic republic, so those that have the best ideas and are most suited to govern can be elected. Now, it is strange. I believe we have a lot of election fraud and things going on. But I digress. I pointed out what I needed to point out with the Julian Assange psyop. They can write any laws that they choose to, because they already refuse to obey the laws that they have written, which in and of itself is illegal and corrupt, and that needs to change. And once it does, it is my firm belief that we will enter a new golden age here in the United States. And this is part of the esoteric discussion that we will be having today, is freedom. It is about freedom. Freedom, the magic of freedom, and the way to attain it is a long obscured, veiled. This is the providence of philosophers and mages and sages and wizards, because these types of things, well, it's clear that they don't want you to know, because if you know, then you are free. And if you are free, you cannot be controlled. And if you cannot be controlled, you are no longer a slave. And every master, to be a master, needs a slave. So that's why these principles are esoteric and hidden. All right. Now, throughout the ages, the major challenge that's confronted the greatest teachers of truth, or rather, throughout the ages, a major challenge has confronted the greatest teachers of truth. And it is, by what method can the human mind be reached with the truth that sets it free? Now, my friend and mentor spoke some ancient words, delivered some ancient wisdom to me of how to put spirit. How do you put spirit? How do you put the soul into what is a bag of meat and bones? How does the flesh, or what was flesh, become alive with soul? That's not quite exactly the words that he used. That's to paraphrase rather. But that is the magic. How do you awaken the human soul? How do you free the human soul? Because I maintain that any political system that you go to, any monetary system that you go to, there can be no technological change. There can be no dismantling of the nuclear power plants. There can be no end to war. There can be no good business if there is not an awakening of the human spirit and the realization of each person's own sovereignty and power. And when people recognize their own sovereignty and their own power, and they can be the I am that is, then so much progress will be made in a very, very rapid way. And YouTube has offered us, we have these opportunities now to start to cast aside the nonsense and begin to focus on art and music and the pinnacle of self-actualization. Of course, we've got environmental challenges and earth changes and things that will challenge our survival, because we have to meet at first those base needs. But the best way forward in part of the time that we have to prepare, people talk about prepping. Well, this is prepping. This is the most important part of prepping. Because if you strip away everything else, you strip away whatever guns you bought, whatever ammo you bought, the water purifier, you strip away the clothes off your back, strip away your house and your family, there is only one thing that you ever really, truly have. And that is you and your spirit and what is inside of you and the knowledge that you have attained. Your wisdom, the very essence of yourself is all that really is. And God, there are two things that, well, there's only one thing I'm absolutely certain about, and that is the presence of God, and that we stand in the presence of God. And God is all around us. The rest, well, that I think is one of the first steps to truth, to recognize the presence of God. I don't really hardly see how you could not recognize the presence of God. But I remember a time in my own life where I did not respect God like I should have. Because it was not a concept that I knew about. I mean, I knew about prayer, and I'd heard about these things, and I knew that churches existed, and I said prayers, and I said grace before meals and things, but didn't really truly recognize the presence of God. And recognizing the presence of God has come through experience and through many miracles that manifest all around us. It just, when your aperture becomes wide enough, you begin to see the presence of God in everything. And so it's such a beautiful thing. But again, I digress, but that's part of the fun of the Ambient Glow radio presentation, because, well, I have an intent, I have a message, a place to go, but as the river flows, as we move just from one transition to the piece like we do in life, we'll get wherever we are going somehow. So the magic, or the question was, what would be the magic? What challenges? By what method can the human mind be reached with the truth that sets it free? Well, it is the use of story and parable. And this enormous secret has been used by all the great teachers in history, whether it be from the New Testament or Zen Buddhism. It's always, or not always, but it is found, part of the magic is found in antidote and an analogy, or antidotes and analogies. Wise men, both ancient and modern, Socrates, Plato, Emerson, Thoreau, they teach with stories and legends, illustrations of the mind in lecture and writing. Now here's a quote I will read, and I believe I attributed the quote in the show notes, or not really the show notes, but whatever the description is there below the video. The great teachers have therefore always exhausted truth with most, let me start again. The great teachers have therefore always entrusted truth with most confidence to parables which, because of their simplicity, picturesqueness, and association with everyday life, are a thought form most likely to be remembered and least likely to be corrupted. Each man can perceive that depth of truth to which he has a capacity to respond. Now let me pick up another little book here. This is part of the miracle method of psychopictography. And I will share, let's see, that particular quote was from Raynor C. Johnson, and the book that he wrote at that time, I believe, was called The Imprisoned Splendour, and that was in 1953. And let's have a little tea here. Now, when I began today, I was so greatly nervous because I had actually scheduled a live stream, because I've always liked to go as the river flows with a little chaos. I believe I mentioned that Rosicrucian sang Ordo ab chaos, or order out of chaos. So to be regimented and segmented in time, and time as it is kept is very much an invention of man. Even though it existed, it exists, but it had not been regimented and kept so precisely. And when I find myself keeping such precision it's disruptive, because then it's hard for me to find a place to relax in order to explore. But time is kind of ritualistic in a way, as dates are ritualistic in a way, as the phases and environment, phases of the moon, or the environment, or the rising of the sun, or the movement of the stars is all ritualistic in a way, because it marks the exterior, the static observable, which I talked bits, just touched on briefly when we were reading from Creative Evolution yesterday. Fixed objects, to root ourselves in a time that everyone shares, or observations that everyone shares, or sort of shares, a continuity in perspective. And I've spoken about the continuity of perspective regarding ritual before, when I talk about martial arts forms, and how when you learn a martial art form, you have an instructor, and then yourself, and then perhaps another audience. Well, you are taught by your instructor, and you learn the form, and in the execution of that form, all things become rooted in time, because you know what movement comes next. You know what movement preceded it. Your instructor can almost see into the future, because he knows what the past was, and he knows what is expected to come next. So it's the transition of the repeat, or the repetition of the ritual. It's the transition between the movements that creates the form, and therefore ritual. It's a way to root all perspective regarding time and space, and that's just ritual and movement, and the way that often people will observe prayer or perform other let's say less wholesome rituals that are observed by some dark forces on this earth, which will shortly be banished to the moon. Food for the moon, I think they say. 48 laws for them. All right. The tea is good. The tea is good. I want to make sure that I get a good spot here, because it is parable. All right, and I guess what a very nice piece to bring out now will be how confusion helps. And I'll just read straight from this book here, because I think it is very well written. At this point, I want to discuss with you the problem of confusion. As you go through these pages, do not be afraid to be confused. Confusion is an honest emotion. A man has broken well into the open when he can say, "I don't know," without being afraid of what he has just said. To realize that you don't know this or that is the beginning of new wisdom. For instance, it is not wrong to be puzzled about what you want from life any more than it is not wrong to know what kind of food you want for dinner. It is never wrong to be either physically or psychologically hungry. What is wrong is to accept a piece of fruit without determining whether it is real or artificial. Do not shy away from a new idea that appears beyond your understanding. No principle is beyond human understanding. It cannot be. The truth, however veiled it may be at present, already dwells within every man and woman. You need not understand the mechanical workings of an airplane in order to be carried aloft. Neither need you wholly grasp the pleasant changes that will take place within you. let them happen. Do not strain at understanding anything. Read, and I say live, with a sense of curiosity and exploration. See everything as good news. Enjoy the adventure. And so, we have a parable. A story was written about a coastal village that was attacked time and time again by great sea monsters. The villagers heard of a magician who could dissolve all kinds of evil simply by looking at it with his all-powerful gaze. Called to the village, he took a stand on a high cliff overlooking the sea. The next time the monsters appeared, he looked steadfastly at them, and they vanished forever. Any man can become a magician. Let me say that again. Any man can become a magician if he will not be afraid of his own confusion, if he will continue to look until he sees. All his negatives will vanish forever. And I'll skip a bit and move to another piece to say why, or the reason why you cannot be happier. The reason why a man does not live happily is not because that the state is non-existent. Also, it is not because happiness is unattainable. Furthermore, it is not because someone or something stands in his way. The reason why a man fails to attain his rightful contentment is for a reason he rarely suspects. What might that be? I need to refresh my tea. I usually refresh when the glass is about half full, and that way just the right amount of heat can go back into the cup. Because this wonderful vessel here, with the materials that it's constructed of, holds the right temperature to create the right brew. So I find it a very prized object, and very different from a plastic jug. The magic of materials was something our ancients, our forefathers knew, and that many have forgotten today for the ease of manufacture. And this is why I say that America, if we want to trade, if we want to create things of value, it doesn't need to be something that's 3D printed or mass manufactured, rolled off a conveyor belt, because I need a table, so let's just have a bazillion different types, or a bazillion of the same table, or a McDonald's on every corner, or a big box store everywhere that sells the same thing all over the place, a single bookstore, a single entity of just mass production to suit every need, but what is wholesome and unique. And this is why I say that a return to craftsmanship through artistry is a way that we can employ every American to create things that can go all around the world, that will be highly sought after because they are not mass produced, but because they are handmade. America has fine craftsmen. It is a tradition of craftsmanship that still exists here in the United States. That was a carefully cultivated brand, and why everybody in the world wanted something that was made in America, because we take pride in the things that we do and the things that we create. My family is much more exacting than I am when it comes to the precision and presentation of the thing, much to my own duress. for example, I very much dislike cutting grass. I like to just let it grow. But then it looks unkempt, and it always irritates my allergies, and it always, it's just, it's almost like I would rather almost do anything else other than cut grass. But my family is precise in the way that they do things because they're craftsmen, and they take great pride in the things that they do. So they would see it as a poor reflection upon themselves if I did not keep my grass in order with the rest of what our family, where we lived, our collective, because it would be a poor representation or represent poorly on the whole. But I suppose that my philosophies have been a little bit different all throughout. I still share much in common with my family that I love, but there's many things that are different. But that's, it had to be to the inch precise, done on a day, in an exacting way. But this is the type of a craftsmanship that can be represented by an American made in America brand. We can make things by hand, and they will be very valuable, and they require more time, they require more labor, they require a master, a journeyman, and an apprentice to craft these things. And we have all sorts of natural resources that we can use, and use them responsibly, like our wonderful hardwood trees. And these are things, well, we can replant as we give, and take extra care not to remove the things that are really old and that have been around for such a long time. It would be almost a crime to take it to craft something when something else would suffice. You certainly would want to sacrifice great age and great wisdom for something new. Just like I say, the most prized resource that you could have in a community, and is often ignored in these days, is your elderly. The elderly are the most valuable resource you could possibly have, which is why they need to be treated so well. Like I say, and have said before, you could put 10, or you gather 100 old men. You could call an old man a man that has attained the age of 80, and well, what do you have? You've got 80,000 years of experience. Something like that. I hope my mental math is right. But I'm not afraid to make mistakes. Even if I did know the answer, which I don't, I'm going to guess. Let's say it's 80,000. Could I be wrong? Maybe. Leave a comment if I am wrong. But I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm not afraid to say, I don't know. This is not manufacture. This is not anything but what it is. It is just life. I'm not trying to be an authority. I'm just trying to convey something that may be helpful, and to share a bit of myself with you. That's Ambient Glow Radio, the Pajama Scholar. This is the form that I think will be a fine thing to develop, so we can use these types of platforms to awaken and then discuss and come to fast resolutions in a very comfortable way, and learn. The opportunity to learn from one another is great. without having to travel. All right, so let me continue. Now, I believe I left with the reason why a man fails to attain his rightful contentment is for a reason he rarely suspects. A man fails to attain personal liberation because he is unaware that a state actually exists. And let me read that again because I missed a word. A man fails to attain personal liberation because he is unaware that such a state actually exists. A man never goes after something unless he at least suspects that it is real, that it is there. He must therefore become consciously aware, even if dimly at first, that an entirely new world exists for him. This new world has been proclaimed throughout the ages to unthinking mankind. It appears when a man or a woman becomes receptive to esoteric knowledge, secret knowledge. It is secret only because millions of unhappy people will not receive and do not understand it. But you can dare to be different. Then you will be different from the millions of unhappy people. You will know the truth that sets you free. You may be sure that we are not talking about anything remote or impractical. We are looking into a far superior way of life that you can find and enjoy today. Man's most tormenting and most carefully concealed fear is that there is no alternative road to the one which he now painfully endures. There is an alternative, and an utterly peaceful one. But he must express a rebellious sort of courage in order to find it. He must deliberately abandon his so-called securities and start down a new road, as unfamiliar as it may be, by using the 4 golden keys. He finally finds what he seeks. A new life of abundant cheer is found in one way, and one way only. All others lead to endless anxiety. It is found through an awareness of its existence. This is the entire secret. We must catch a glimpse of this fresh life for ourselves. We can start by remembering that exists within, not without. We already possess this higher state, but we must become aware of our rich possession. This awareness will break through with increasing force as we dare to seek it beyond our present mental attitudes. What prevents us from being aware? Our own resistances. We are afraid that if we let go of our present beliefs, as useless as they are, that the unknown might be even worse. But we must dare. And then we find the very thing we feared was our very liberty. Suppose you tell a man that just over the hill there is a grand castle ready for his occupancy. He will want to believe you, but will be unable to do so. He has been fooled too many times by too many people. All his previous journeys have led to disappointment. He is not going to risk getting hurt again, so you really can't blame him for balking. Nevertheless, the castle actually exists, whether he ventures toward it or not. Claimed or not, it is always there, ready for him. Here we seem to have a major problem. The man will not walk toward the castle until he sees it, yet he cannot see it until he walks toward it. No problem. There is a way out, and any man can take it. So let's see. let's use a little parable here. Let's suppose that our man is willing to take the first hesitant step away from familiar ground toward the castle he cannot see as yet. Suppose he willingly walks just far enough to catch his first glimpse of the castle. Maybe he sees only a tiny top corner. That is enough. He has seen something that makes him excited, curious, eager. Everything within him now responds to that first glimpse with new vitality. So now he takes few, I get excited. So now he takes a few more forward steps and then some more until he finally possesses the castle. It is his to occupy and enjoy. And now I will move to the final piece of today's Ambient Glow Radio presentation, Operation Tossaway. And how to use Operation Tossaway. And I hope you are enjoying the form. I'm trying to accommodate my audience a bit more without trying to schedule live streams too far in advance, because I hate to make a liar out of myself. And as I've noted before, it is disruptive to the consciousness when I'm trying to convey an idea if I'm scheduled to do so. And this is why corporatists often lack creativity. And they have to steal everything, steal all the ideas, steal the art, steal. They thieve and thieve because they cannot be possessed by a certain type of creativity when they are on the clock. They're bound to the ticking of time. They're bound to have to produce a result in a specific time set. And this is not necessarily the way of nature. How much does the grass grow in an hour of time? Well, does the grass care? No, it just grows. It's measured after both the grass has grown and the time has passed. All right. So, how to use Operation Tossaway. How does an alert awareness solve daily difficulties? Let's take a familiar problem expressed by one man. Doctors and psychologists declare that a man has all the natural energies he needs. If this is so, why are there so many tired people, including myself? And we will solve this with a parable. The fable is told of the traveler staggering down the road with a rock in one hand and a brick in the other. On his back was a sack of earth, and around his waist was wound a long coil of vines. On his head was balanced a heavy pumpkin. Along the way, he met a villager who asked, "Weary traveler, why burden yourself with that big rock?" The one he carried on his back. "That's odd," replied the traveler, "but I never really noticed it before." So he tossed the rock aside and he felt much better. Along came another villager who inquired, "Tell me, weary traveler, why wear yourself out with that heavy pumpkin?" "I'm glad you pointed it out," said the traveler, "because I didn't realize what I was doing to myself." So he knocked the pumpkin off his head and went on his way with a much lighter step. One by one, the villagers made him aware of his needless burdens. So, one by one, he abandoned them. Finally, he was a free man and walked like one. Now, really, and that's the end of the story, the parable. Now, really, what was his problem? The rock and the pumpkin? Not really. It was his unawareness of them. Once he saw them as pointless burdens, he dropped them soon enough and was no longer tired. And this is the daily problem of many people. They are carrying unnoticed loads. No wonder they are tired. What are some of these loads that burdens a man's mind and steal his energy? Negative thoughts, blaming and accusing others, permitting gloomy impressions to nap in our minds, carrying a load of false guilt for things we couldn't help, self-pity, believing there is no way out. Everyone has his own brand of energy-robbing burdens. The sooner we start Operation Tossaway, the sooner we will feel better and walk lighter. So, I hope you have enjoyed today's presentation of Ambient Glow Radio with your pajama scholar, Hank McGurk. And we shall, with military precision, engage in Operation Tossaway. It's been Hank. Catch you on the flip side.